We have with us here today an outstanding team, Mélissa Cornet, a rights researcher, and Kiana Hayeri, a photographer and accomplished photojournalist. Both have traveled across Afghanistan, meeting, talking with, and photographing women who've endured one of the most misogynist regimes in the world today, the Taliban in Afghanistan. And the moderator for tonight's program is Sarah Leen, who many of you know as the former director of photography for National Geographic and Partners, and now an avid educator, independent editor, and co-founder of the Visual Thinking Collective. And Sarah just recently joined the board of directors with Social Documentary Network. So thank you very much, Sarah. And let me turn this over now to Sarah Leen.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Glenn. Welcome, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here with Kiana and Mélissa. And thank you, Glenn and Social Documentary Network, for having this program. I will also do a short introduction of Kiana and Mélissa, and then I will hand it over to them for their presentation. After that, we will have time for conversation and questions. So please put any questions you have at any time in the chat, but we won't start taking them until after their presentation. Kiana is an Iranian-Canadian photojournalist and storyteller, born in Tehran, and moved to Toronto, Canada when she was a teenager, where photography became her tool for bridging cultural and linguistic divides. Her early passion for telling stories with images led her to move to Kabul in 2014, where she remained for 8 years, capturing the complex realities of life in Afghanistan. Kiana is the recipient of many, many awards. Just Google her. You can get the whole list. But they also include the Chris Hondros Fund, Robert Capa Gold Medal, Oscar Barnack Award, Tim Hetherington Award, and recently the 14th, and I'm sad to say the last, Carmignac Photojournalist Award, which supported the production of the book No Woman's Land, which we'll hear more about today. Here it is. This beauty. Check it out. Kiana is based in Bosnia and Sarajevo. Mélissa Cornet has worked in Afghanistan since 2018, doing research on women's rights for a number of local and international organizations, and is the co-laureate of the Carmignac Award with Kiana. And she made me keep this really short. So, I mean, there's a lot more wonderful things to say about her. So it's her fault that it's only one sentence. And she is based in Tbilisi, Georgia. So thank you so much for this, for everybody coming here. I know that we are living in increasingly challenging times. So being together like this in community, I think, is more important than ever. So I really appreciate all of you joining us here and to listen to these amazing women who are working to create a better world for women. So Kiana, Mélissa, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to give an extra shout out to Mélissa, who's stranded in Dubai right now because of all the flights that have been canceled. So she's tuning in under very, very stressful circumstances. Let me share my screen.
Hit the music button.
Hit the music. Yes, sure, it's on. It's on. There we go. Mélissa, on to you.
Hi everyone, thanks Glenn, thanks Sarah, thanks Kiana. So we're here today to talk to you about No Woman's Land. No Woman's Land is a project that Kiana and I did in 2024, which we continued on. We were able to present it with exhibition, a photo book, a website, and much more we'll talk about. It's a project that we did with the support of the Carmignac Foundation Photojournalism Prize, which, like its name doesn't indicate, is actually a grant and not a prize. So Kiana and I were able to produce this body of work thanks to this grant by the Carmignac Foundation. We'll talk about a few points to kind of like structure our thoughts, and maybe Kiana, we can just show that very briefly. Or maybe we start with the video. Wonderful. So No Woman's Land is a project that looks at women's rights in Afghanistan under the Taliban. As some of you might know, in August 2021, the Taliban, this Deobandi extremist Muslim movement, took over Kabul and all of Afghanistan. It was not their first time in power. They already had been in power between 1996 and 2001 in Afghanistan. Since coming to work, they have taken almost 100 edicts and decisions curtailing the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan. This includes going to school. Today, girls in Afghanistan cannot go to school past grade 6. They cannot go to university. They cannot go to private institute. They cannot work in most jobs. They cannot even leave their home without being accompanied by a mahram or a male chaperone, usually their husband, their brother, or their father. They cannot show their face. They cannot have their voices heard in public. They cannot go to the gym. They cannot go to parks. They cannot go to beauty salons, which have been shut down. They cannot go to public baths. So today in Afghanistan, being a girl means basically having to stay indoors inside your own home. It's something that's very hard for us to, I think, comprehend in today's world, how we could be a world in which girls cannot go to school. So Kiana and I have been working in Afghanistan for a really long time. Kiana as a photographer and me as a researcher. I'm a lawyer by training, and almost all of my work in Afghanistan has been looking at women's rights, both before 2021 and until today, so also after the Taliban take over. When we were able to get the support of the Carmignac Foundation, there's a lot of thinking that went into how we would actually do these projects. And that's why we're going to talk a little bit here. We'll talk about what we saw, the women we met, the stories that stayed with us, but we're also going to talk very practically, how do you actually go about doing a project in a really, really challenging environment, high risk environment. We, of course, did not go to Afghanistan as journalists. We had to find ways where we could still work safely for us, but also for the women we interviewed. We had to talk a lot about our approach. How do we show an extremely difficult situation for women and girls in a dignified fashion? So a lot of questions about representation, dignity, etc. These are the kind of few points that we're going to talk about, but then we'll also have time for Q&A. So please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat, to note them down for later. We're really happy to have actually a time to exchange, and we actually would love to get also tough questions about the project, so don't hesitate on that. So the project started really before we even traveled to Afghanistan. As we were thinking about how do we do a project on women's rights in Afghanistan, what about security? We both have been working in Afghanistan for a long time, and so we had an understanding of what it means, of the risk we are taking. When we thought about security, we thought about our own security, but Kiana and I are not Afghan, so it gives us very much a form of security that Afghan women do not have. When we talk about security in this project, the most important for us was the security of the women and girls we were meeting. How do we meet them? How do we contact them? Where do we meet? How do we go there? Do we meet in their house, in our house? If there's a checkpoint, what is our story with our driver, Kiana and I? All of these things were really important. How do we store Kiana's photos? How do we store my notes from the interviews? To give you an example, the way we went about it was that Kiana would store the photos. She would not caption them until way after we were out of the country. I would take all of my notes in a little notebook that mixed cursive handwriting, English, French, and Farsi in a way that it was basically impossible to read over the notes until after you were out of the country and could, sit down and then caption the photos like that. We had a lot of talk about agency. How do you make sure that women that you meet understand the risks they are taking in having their photos taken and then exhibited in Paris, online in publications such as The Guardian, for example, in a photo book? How do you deal in a situation in which a woman might not be literate, might not have a smartphone, might not understand the internet. And then you are trying to explain these things to her, but how do you ensure that she can give her informed consent? So there was a lot of work that we did, even before doing an interview, even before taking a photo, even before meeting a woman. A lot of work went into every single photo that you're going to see, every single interaction, every single interview that we did. And I think that's very central because, you know, every interview was a result of basically hours and days of work and coordination. So that's kind of like, an introduction, and then we can start going a little bit over that. Kenna, do you want to add anything before we talk
Yeah.
about the second
No, I
part?
think one of the things is also like one of the things we value and we want to emphasize on is our collaboration and how two people with two different skill sets, how we combine them and turn it into this body of work, and how Mélissa and I, we always work together 24/7 for 10 weeks in total, and how we weigh into each other's work. If I'm taking a photo, Mélissa would see something in a different room, ping me is like, go, I think they're dancing in the other room or they're cooking or something. So I would go, or if we're doing an interview, she would do her questions and then ask me, is there anything that I'm missing or should I ask this differently? So it was a very much collaboration from day one, from the day we started the research, writing our application, getting the grants, to executing it in the field. And one of the most beautiful things that happened was, and the reason I bring this up because we're going to talk about Musca now, is that we had the chance in the evenings to sit together and talk and reflect, and it added a lot of value to the project. One of my favorite things that Melissa pointed out one night was we had we had photographed a girl who Tahmina, she was in first year of university when Taliban took over, so she was put out of university. She spoke perfect English, came from a loving family. Her father loved her. They gave her all the opportunities she needed. And then Taliban came, took that opportunity away, and she was very, very, very sad and depressed. And then Muska, on the other hand, the photo on the left is a young girl that we met. She's 14. We met her in east of Afghanistan when shortly after she was deported out of Pakistan. Muska was born and raised in Pakistan. While she was in Pakistan as an illegal refugee, undocumented. She went to school and she studied. When Pakistan cracked down and started sending all the Afghans back, when she arrived in Afghanistan, there was no education. So her family settled down in this like little house with no water or no well or anything. So Muska was married off to the son of the landlord in exchange for a well and a solar panel, which is only a couple of $100. But Muska was very happy. Muska was very happy because she finally, I mean, that marriage for her meant security, meant that she will have food to eat, she will have a roof above her head. And then this is the part that Melissa and I we were reflecting. I was like, this girl who had all these opportunities, speaks English, benefited the most from the American invasion, the 20 years. And this other girl, Muska, who doesn't have any.
Oh, can I get disconnected?
Kiana, we can't
For
Okay,
hear
I'll
you.
for
just.
you and I, it's
Oh,
horrendous. We can't believe it, but she's happy.
thanks, Kenna. You got disconnected for just like 1 second.
Sorry. Go on.
And I think this was really interesting is that, and I think it's also a result of Kiana now, like, working in Afghanistan for a decade and me for 8 years. It's just like you really see so many nuances in the way you want to tell the story that you often don't really have the space or the opportunity to do in traditional media. And so, for example, Muska's example is very interesting, both because you can talk a little bit more about the culture, for example. You can also talk about the fact that one of the worst things for girls today in Afghanistan is child marriage. Child marriage, almost all cases you will encounter is because of economic economic conditions, the economic crisis happening in Afghanistan. This economic crisis is created very much by the West because of sanctions, because of the assets of the central bank being frozen, because of, all of the macroeconomic measures. And so it's very interesting for us to also try to go a little bit deeper, like it's very easy to blame the Taliban if you're not also looking at social and cultural norms in Afghanistan. Like a lot of Afghan men are very patriarchal, and that has nothing to do with the Taliban, without looking at 20 years of intervention, failed intervention, without looking at the fact that the economy is suffering mostly because of the West. If you do not like kind of zoom out and try to take the time to go into all of these details and nuances, I think you're kind of missing a part of the story. So it was very important for us to really try, thanks to the research, thanks to journalism already done, to really try to be fair. Geographically, we went to the north, the south, the center, to talk about both women in urban and rural areas, about women very educated and women not educated at all. We talked about wives and mothers of Taliban, also to get their perspective. And they said, look, yes, the situation is horrible right now, but at least the war is over. We are at peace for the first time in decades. So also to be like, there are some women for which the situation is actually better now. So you really have to be, I think, fair in how you do this representation. And that's really where I feel like our partnership was very strong in terms of making sure that we were being as, we were really making all of these women's stories justice.
One
And
of the,
yeah, go ahead.
one of the stories that we looked into, we wanted to not only, so we spoke to like more than 100 women across Afghanistan and tried to look at all sorts of all aspects of it. But one of it was members of LGBTQI plus. And they were prosecuted under the previous government. They are as well. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is during the 20 years of invasion, there were these NGOs backed by international organizations that provide a safe space if they needed help. If there was a crisis or something, they could go to or get checked for HIV, and that has disappeared. But treatment of members of LGBTQI has not changed. In this story, I'm going to do my best. The pronouns are going to get a little complicated, but on the left is a trans parent identifying born as a biological man, has a family, has got kids, but they identify as a trans woman. And in their private life, they dress up as a woman. They have a private life. They work sometimes they work as a sex worker. And on the right side, it's their child who was born as a biological girl but identifies as a boy. And the irony to the story is that they were at the time when we met them, they were 12-year-olds just finishing grade 6, and as of the following year they wouldn't be able to go to school because as a girl education is banned beyond grade 6, even though this person, they don't identify as a girl. It gets very complicated. Anything else, Melissa, you want to add?
Well, that this goes back to the first point, which was security. We did met 3 trans people in Afghanistan, and after that, we decided that actually we were putting them at too much risk, and so we made the decision that we would not try to meet more people because it was just not a reasonable risk that we were asking them to take. And even though they were willing to take it, we decided that it was just not something that was ethical for us to do. So we have 3 interviews, and then it was supposed to be a whole chapter that we had to actually cut short because of all of these reasons. And I think that's something that we constantly have to also go to. A lot of maybe we can go a little bit more into the creative process now. As you'll see, most of the photos are square, actually. I don't know if Kiana, you want to talk a bit about that, and then the neons.
Yeah, I have been photographing Afghanistan for a long time, and it mostly always have been for, newspapers, magazines. They expect a certain aesthetic, usually triangle, very reportage. And I wanted to do something that was different. And what this grant did for us was that it gave us the freedom to do what we wanted to do. And one of the things I wanted to do, thinking at the time that this might be my last trip to Afghanistan, I want this to be a timeless project. So that's why I chose square format, because it's a much more quiet, timeless way of photographing. It also, I think, I don't know what it does to my head, but it slows me down. And another thing that we wanted to do is, I'm going to bring it back to this. We used a lot of neon lights, and this was, I wanted to photograph Afghanistan differently, and I was inspired by films that my partner, Jordan Bryan, makes. He had used neon in two of his films, and it was the first time that I had seen Afghanistan in neon lights. And if you go, Afghans love neon. So you go to ice cream shop, pizza shop, you go to parks, everybody, it's just always, always, always neon lights. And we thought if we can't meet these women outside in a public space, and we're always relying on their spaces or our space or somewhere, an office or something in between, we're going to bring those neon lights into their rooms. And this is, if I was doing this for, let's say, for example, New York Times, or I would have not had that creative freedom to be able to do that.
And I think there's a slide with all of the neon photos actually, which is quite cool. I think for me it was also very interesting because Afghanistan is one of these countries that photographers love to always portray in the same palette and the same way, like really much stuck in time and almost like a little bit neo-colonialist. So also being like, no, Afghans love, they love the neon lights, they love like, all these things and their smartphones and all of that. And it was interesting. Sometimes you would still see today some photos from photographers and you wouldn't know if it was taken in 2026 or in 1976, except for the quality. So it was also nice to like challenge that a little bit. And another thing was also that one feedback we got early on when we starting showing the photos in the exhibition, and people were surprised. They said like, oh, the photos are very beautiful, actually. And I think it was a very conscious decision of us to be like, it's a harsh reality we're showing, but we don't want to show women in a degrading way. We don't want to show them in burqa, which means completely anonymized with no face. We don't want to show them begging or in vulnerable situation. And if you read the stories and the captions, the stories are difficult stories, but they really deserved to be portrayed in a way that was both safe, but also very respectful and dignified. For example, on this photo on the left, the one of the snowball battle, we wanted to show these teenagers who, after a snowstorm, just wanted to do what any teenager anywhere in the world would have done, which is go out and play in the snow. Also to note, like I love this photo, but Kiana had absolutely so many fantastic photos that we ended up not using also once again for ethical reasons because the faces were too showing too much. So and on that, I
Um,
think it was very, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, do you want to talk about joy as a form of resistance?
That's another point. So when we go back to like they deserve to be represented in this way with like, kindness and respect and even love. Early on, we also went back to this idea of, what does a teenager anywhere do? Like you put music, you dance, you have a snowball fight and all of that. And we decided early on we want to work on this form of resistance, joy as a form of resistance, especially in a country that really tries to deny your humanity, playing music, wearing makeup, meeting with your friend, dancing, all these things are outlawed. We decided that we wanted to document that. So, for example, we spent a lot of time with friends, with also teenage girls at a birthday party, just hanging out at home. We wanted to show this aspect, and we were very glad to see that it's something that really resonated with people. They would see the photo and say, like, oh, it could be my daughter, like she does that with her friends. So it was important for us also to show this like tiny, tiny little glimmer of hope almost.
And one of the things, again, back to the creative process, is that one of the things we loved about doing this project was that we had, it was actually Melissa's idea to collaborate. Okay, so on our first week we were in Afghanistan, we met an art teacher she's in that photo sitting on the floor holding a mirror. And we met an art teacher, and we, with some of her students, we asked them, so what are your dreams? What do you want to do in the future? And they had all these dreams that was not reachable ever, with Taliban being in place. So we collaborated with Fatima, who, by the way, is in France now, thanks to many people, actually, a lot of people, but also specifically Mélissa, who has been working very hard to get her out. We asked all those girls what your dreams are, and this little girl here, she wanted to be a heart surgeon, but obviously there's no education beyond grade 6, so they never can go to school or go to university to become a doctor. So we got her a little coat and like got a little teddy bear to be on made a surgery room, and we photographed their dreams, and then they took those photographs into art class, which we'll show you shortly, to so they can paint their dreams over them. Mesa, do you
Mm.
want to talk about the photograph on the right, and then we're going to show them some examples? The eyes and
Oh,
ears.
yes. Sorry. This is another form. This I was very much also about how Kiana and I did everything together. So it's not a matter in which like I did an interview and then Kiana took a photo. Like Kiana sat with me during the interviews and always asked questions that I might not have thought about because I come from a very legal and research point of view. Just like when we were taking the photos, I was like, oh, she mentioned this and that. Maybe that would, be interesting. So it was a collaboration much more than just, the addition of the interview next to the photo. And the project on the right was something very cool that Kiana did with like for women journalists. We wanted to show women journalists in a way that was very safe for them. So we decided to focus on the eyes. And it's because all the interviews we did with all 12 women journalists, they came back to this idea of we are the eyes of societies, the eyes and ears of societies. We are here to watch what's happening and then write about it. So it was another way in which we could tell a story while keeping them safe. What was very cool in this photo on the left, for example, is that even the boss of that lady was unable to identify her. So we were very happy to have found her a nice way. And then to go back to the Dreams girls, I think it was very interesting for us. I think we have some of the Dreams girls at the end of the
Oh,
PowerPoint.
yeah.
We can show it to you. We could really play with some visual languages. So for example, the dreams girl is kind of like how do you show this loss of one's dreams, the fact that you cannot become a doctor, you cannot become a journalist, you cannot become a teacher. How do you still show it in an interesting way? And so that was one language that we could use to do that. We also used a few other ideas like videos, Polaroid. We can talk a bit more about that at the end. It was just, I would say very almost not fun is the right way, but it was just very creative to be able to have this space and this time. It's very rare these days to just have the time to explore an idea. And then those of you who have seen the book, you've seen all of these different visual languages we were able to use with Kiana's photo that just work really well.
And one of the things we had to do because it was such a big body of work, and at the time when you're in it so much, it's really hard to be organized and think about it. We had short period of time. We wanted to get the most out of it before we leave Afghanistan, so we photographed everything and anything. But using neon light was one of the things that kind of like glued this project together, right? On the right, this is I didn't lit this. This is like actually a shop, and it's lit with neon light. Mannequins or any representation of human being, man or woman, doesn't matter, is banned by the Taliban. So mannequins are often either covered with a plastic bag or beheaded or their hands are cut off. And so this is when Melissa and I were like kind of like running to a different shoot, and then Melissa caught this scene, so we came back and photographed it. And then on the left is Fatima, the art teacher that we ended up collaborating with and go on to make bigger things. Or so on the if you so on the left, it's a family who were also forced out of Pakistan. They were deported back into Afghanistan, but also like on the right, it's like we had very little time to shoot on the streets in public spaces, but it's like I think the colors were inspired by some of the neon lights that we used. It was inspired by spaces that we had been to, and we know like the Afghans are not ashamed of painting the whole ice cream shop in pink. And we really tried to play with that, the indoor, outdoor. Melissa, do you want to talk about the exhibition in Paris and how they built it and the idea?
But yeah, so you saw the photo earlier of the snowball fight. This is actually the only outdoor scenes we have of women. Every single photo we took of women for this project had to be indoors. It was just the only safe option. We could not meet women in third places. First of all, because there's barely any third places available. I think one time we had coffee with one in like just a restaurant in Kabul, but otherwise it was impossible. Um, and so first, the whole neon, like Kiana explained, was about bringing the outdoors indoors. And so when we were working on the Paris exhibition, it's something we could actually bring, and we'll show you a few photos at the end. And so the whole scenography, the Carmignac Foundation, we was able to get this amazing scenographer team on board. We actually played with this indoor outdoor. So when you entered the exhibition, you had actually an indoor space where all of the photos of the women were, whether it's about, playing, dancing, education, studying. While the outdoor space, well, was where you had all of the scenes of exteriors, but also the photos of women journalists, for example, because they are the one who are watching what is happening in society and reporting on that. And it was fantastic to also have, I mean, for me, it was the first time to just like, you have this body of work. How do you translate it into an actual physical experience as well? We also worked with video and sound. Um, we worked with research. We had all this list of edicts covering an entire wall about like this is the hundreds of decisions taken against women and girls. We had this fantastic also like photos printed on very thin curtains that moved a little bit with the wind. So it was, for me at least, it was an amazing process to also think about how does a project look like as a physical space.
Absolutely. And here's some of the Dream Girls chapter, which honestly, I mean, this is very significant. Afghan passport is one of the worst passport anybody can have. You cannot travel with it. So for a young girl who's banned from everything, who is systematically erased from the society and has an Afghan passport, the dream was she wanted to be a world trotter, somebody who travels the world and, like the Eiffel Tower or Liberty or this little girl wanted to be a heart surgeon. We also met an amazing girl who wanted to be a parkour, and then my favorite part, Melissa.
I also worked with sketches a lot, so we were also able to bring that in. For one of the example was there were certain places in which Kenna could not take photos. For example, we went to a couple of wedding parties. They are segregated in Afghanistan, so we were obviously in the women part, which, the women have fantastic dresses and makeup and all of that. But because it's a safe space, actually, it's also a space where photos are not allowed. So it was one way in which, for example, we could use sketches. So that was nice to also be able to bring that dimension in. We also worked with Polaroid. Yes, we have them here. So we went actually back to Kiana's archive. All of the photos she took before the Taliban takeover of women being a shopkeeper, women being on a TV set for one of these, how do you call it in English? Just like TV show, a woman working out in a woman gym, women in universities, woman in Bande Amir, this beautiful park in Bamiyan. And all of these things are no longer allowed today in Afghanistan. So it was also very interesting to, go back to Kiana's archive and be like, these photos, you would not be able to take them today. And it was inspired by the work of an Iranian photographer. And Kiana, you're going to have to remind me his name. Um,
I
We'll
was
put
looking
it
at
who
we'll put
worked
it
who had the same approach when he was working in Iran. He did a lot of photography, but of course there was a whole safety, security, and ethical dimension to showing people in Iran. So he was actually also using this cutout as a way of still telling a story while keeping people's identity safe. So we also played a lot around that. Um,
Amir Ali Qasemi. Sorry, I know way too many Amir Ali in my life. So Amir Ali Qasemi, who at the time he was working on this in early 2000, which was not normal to see photos of young people partying and doing all these things that was banned at that time was like him. So to go around it, what he did, he had photographed them, but then he wiped them out. So inspired by that body of work, we also did this. One of the things that we talk and we discuss between us is the distance. How much distance do you keep between you and the subject? And it's because they say photography is objective, which is not. I never believed in that. It's so we were not shy about immersing ourselves into people's lives, like hugging them after a very difficult interview, or we were embedded in a maternal unit for 2 nights. And spend hours and hours with the midwives and as the babies were delivered. And that's how you really get access, really good access. Remember the first snow scene that we saw? That was it was one of the very first scene that Melissa and I encountered. And it was one of the rare times, probably actually the only time we photographed women outside in a public space. And I think it really set the tone for our project. And one of the chapters we worked on was joy as a form of resistance. We noticed on the very, very early interaction we had with these young people how they find these very, very often people criticize Afghans, mostly Afghan women. Why don't you take on the street? Why don't you protest and ask for your right? And protesting is defined by the environment that you come from. It will look different depending on the backdrop that you have. So yes, we might in America, other places you have the opportunity for now, who knows, to go on the street and protest. But in Afghanistan, just existing, just to be able to be happy, to paint, to dance, all those things are a way of protesting. Melissa, do you want to add anything to the joy as a form of resistance?
No, I mean it's one of my favorite chapter. One day I was talking about this project and actually I got a very good comment from someone in the audience challenging me, saying like, "Oh, but why do you need to show girls wearing makeup and dresses and all of that for you to relate to them? Like why do you need to kind of show them in how, so a certain part of the world sees femininity, for example?" And I thought it was a very good point. You should be able to relate to these stories um without this, but yeah.
And one of the things that I also want to invite people is if you ever pick up a copy of the book or see this body as an exhibition. Oh, wait. Sorry. Am I back on? Can you get the presentation? Okay, perfect. It's that most photos, as happy and as beautiful and as colorful they are, if you read the caption, you realize there's a level of darkness and there's a dark story underneath. The photo on the left is it's a family picnicking. They're all from the same village with the kids in these like little ponds that they were swimming, and it was very, very cold. But Khashru, who's the woman in the photograph, her daughter and her niece had committed suicide a year earlier by throwing themselves into the river shortly after Taliban banned education for women. And you will see that almost throughout the project, as happy and as beautiful they look, there's always a dark story to them. Should we get into the impact?
Yeah. We were very, very, very lucky to get the support of the Carmignac Foundation. And I think it's really worth talking about it for a couple of minutes because it's something to do very good work. It's another thing to have the funding, the time, the space to do this work. I mean, we had 10 weeks over 6 months to do this work. Like no newspaper today or very few grants would give you that much time to do a project like that. But we also had the support of the foundation. And it comes with a comms team, it comes with a publicist, it comes with, you know, support for to do a website, for example, to bring you to Visa pour l'Image and all of these things. And I think it's really important to say that one of the reasons also this project was so successful is because we had all of this support. These are a few photos from the show in Paris. A lot of people ask us, first, they ask us what can we do, which we were able to redirect them to people we know who do very good work in Afghanistan. But also, asking like, oh, what is the impact of the project? And I think we were very realistic, both Kiana and I, that the reason why the world tolerates the Taliban and the treatment of women and girls is not because they don't know what's happening. It's a case of gender apartheid and it's super documented. Everyone knows exactly. We have fantastic journalists still working there. So it's not a matter of us thinking our project is going to open people's eyes and then we're suddenly going to do something about it. There's just no political will at the moment to really address the situation in Afghanistan. And so it can be a bit tough at times to be like, it doesn't matter how good your photos, how good your reporting, how good your research, it might just not have an impact on changing policies. And I think when we had a bit of that moment, we got advice from a very good photo editor, actually, who told us, you also need to understand that you are documenting a page of history and that this work is very important right now, but it will also be very important in a few years. And hopefully we look back at this work in a few years thinking like, how could we have tolerated a country in which girls were not allowed to go to school? This is unbelievable in 2026, It's really, I really have this hope, honestly, and looking at Afghan history, it does give me a lot of hope. The impact of the project, to be very honest with you, apart from redirecting people to like give donation, for example, I think documenting is very important. But for now, Kiana and I's effort go more into actually trying to find ways for Afghan women to leave the country, because I think we both accepted and we asked that question systematically to every single woman we met. Do you have hope your situation can improve? And they all said no. And right now, it's really hard to have a hope that the situation can improve in Afghanistan. So the least we could do is offer Afghan women a safe pathway to migrate so that they can continue their education in other countries, the time for them to be able to go back to their own country to have a life.
Two things I want to add. I do want to give a shout out to the editor who gave us that little tip that you're documenting part of the history. It was actually Jamie Welford, my editor at National Geographic, and at the time where we were photographing things that, as we were photographing them, they were becoming illegal. There was like a minor panic about like, what are we going to do? How are we going to show this? And it was him who said, like just look at it as a time, as a grant for you to document, even if you're not showing your photos now, but you're documenting it now to be shown in 20 years later for the future generation. A very, 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 it really changed the way I look at my photography and the abilities we have. The other thing is that also about hope is yes, none of us have hope now, but we should also all remember that these times change. Look at the history of Afghanistan. Russians came and the Brits came, they left. Russians came and they left. Mujahideen, the first Taliban unit, Americans, they all come. So there will be a time that Taliban will leave. And for that time when they leave, we also, like we were really, really interested to have fun with the project. We decided to turn this book into a photo book, which we have here as well, where we work with designer Santiago Harayemo Escobar and what we did, we got together for 3 days in Melissa's mom's house. We laid out all these photos for 3 days. We looked at them, we talked, we drank wine, to like figure out what this work is about and turned it into this book that has several chapters. Actually, you can see in the photo on the right, you can see all these little chapters with like a little fold out and the theme. And we intentionally kept the text minimal. If you look through the book, it's a lot of photograph. At the end, you get a very brief text message, and not text message, like a brief text caption about each photograph. But we wanted people to have this opportunity because you go to an exhibition, you see it once, you walk away, it's gone in 3 months. You go on screen and you scroll through things 5 times, you get WhatsApp messages, you get distracted. But we wanted to have an object, and this book really has the feeling of an object where you like open it and you have to like spend time with it, to be able to, for people to go to it, put it aside, go back 3 weeks later, reflect on it. And that brings us to the end of our presentation.
Bravo, ladies.
Us
Thank you.
captioning 600 photos in a few days in Sarajevo.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks great. This was wonderful. Can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes, absolutely.
We'll start our conversation. That was wonderful. I'm so proud of you both and the work that you've done and produced here. And this is such a great presentation. It really walks us through. I think I'm going to circle back on a few things. for some questions, and either one of you can answer, and maybe sometimes I'll ask one of you in particular. I I remember you said at some point, Kiana, that you had found your dream collaborator. And
Yes.
I thought, I love that. I love the phrase, and I love that how you're describing your relationship, because I know as a photographer in previous decades, I never really liked being with a writer. I felt like it was very distracting and we never got on the same page. So can you maybe say a little bit more about how, like, had your experience before with, other journalists with you was good, and how this was different, and.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm often almost always working with a journalist, and they're good journalists that you get along. They're journalists that you don't necessarily like the way they work. But one thing that I loved about working with Melissa, and I think we're on the same page, is that we have very different skill sets, almost very, very like Melissa is organized, all about to-do list, charts, taking care of those things, and I'm like this like mess and like so. But we found a way of our skills are very complementary. And communication is really like the base of our collaboration. We were, first of all, 10 weeks on the ground, 24/7, 5 weeks. We never had an argument, which is very, very, very significant. It's like very, but also like at times afterwards, there were things that we didn't agree, but the way we always communicated, like I feel strongly about this. No, I feel strong. Okay, you're right. We do this. Really dream team. I think and another thing that has been very beautiful, we both have other jobs, other things to do. This project has taken a lot of time, but we step in for each other. When one person is busy with work or is dealing with some crisis, the other person steps in, I'll take care of this. Or even in the way we work, because we're always together, right? We explain, one person is photographing, the other one is writing. We would weigh into each other. Anyway, I talked a lot, but dream team. I hope everybody find their Melissas in their lives.
I know that sounds beautiful. And Melissa, you had said that you had never really worked with a photographer before, right? Or at least not like this. Can you say a little bit more when you first had the thought that you two were going to work together? How did you decide to do it? And
So it's actually really interesting because when the call for proposal went out, we both saw it and we both thought about the other one. And I wrote in my note app like, oh, these are the reason why I think it would be very cool to work with Kiana on this. And she had done the same. And then she called me and was like, hey, I talk to you about something. I was like, me too. I was like, you go first, you go first. And I was just like, oh, I saw this Carmignac grant. What do you think? And I was like, it's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. So what's funny is that from the beginning, we both thought about the other. Because I had the research skills, and Kiana has been doing amazing work on women in Afghanistan for so long. And we had been friends already for a few years, but we had never worked together. And I had never worked with a photographer. So it was also very, very new to me. And I mean, it was wonderful also because I mean I learned so much in terms of just even in my own question interviewing skills and writing to just try to be more visual in a way, can I would be like, oh, let's ask about recurring dreams they have, let's ask about colors, let's ask about what does an Afghanistan at peace look for them, I mean at peace for women, I mean, so it was just wonderful. And to go back to Kiana about like dream collaborators, I think, it's also on both being in therapy and being able to have very healthy egos and being very open to feedback and sometimes criticism and all, like it's also wonderful professional skills to be able to be so open-minded. And I think we just learned and grew so much from this. And our friendship fed into our work just like our work fed into our friendship, and that's just wonderful.
Yeah, I know. I love that. And I think you can really see the product of your collaboration and your creativity in the book. I mean, I loved how the genres the styles, the use of the neon, and I love the story about how Afghans love neon, and the drawings and the sketches. Did you make those sketches, Melissa, the little pen and ink ones, or did somebody else make those?
No, I made this. It's
Okay.
something I started doing after the fall of the Taliban, I think as a way of also processing both my memories and what I was seeing. And so it's also something that I was very glad we could bring
Yeah.
in into this into the book, because we have all of this little breather in between each chapter, and each of them brings a little bit of context as well, the
Mhm.
historical context, things like that. So it was good to use all of this different visual language and brings all of these little perspectives and information on that.
Yeah, no, that was great. And it really shows in the book. So you're an artist too, actually, with your drawings. So that's what it's
Yeah, I
perfect.
mean, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. I wanted to just wind back a little bit to logistics. I know people are always curious, kind of behind the scenes, and how do you make this work? So I was thinking like um, just access. Access is key to and sort of like I'm surprised you even got into the country, in some ways. So could you talk a little bit about how you got access and then how you found the women that you worked with?
Mhm. So purely in terms of access, as in getting visas to go to the country, we were able and we were very lucky. I knew a past Republican diplomat who was still in his job because the Taliban were not yet taking control of the embassies and consulate abroad. So we were able to get visas to enter the country. That's one thing. The second thing is to go to provinces. There's a lot of paperwork in terms of traveling. We need letter of authorization from different ministries wherever we want to move. So what we did is my network, which was very complementary to Kiana's network, some of them were very much in the NGO sector, for example. So I was able to actually call friends in NGOs and say like, hey, we need to go to this province. We want to go to the border with Pakistan. We want to go to Badakhshan. Would you do the authorization for us? And in exchange, we'll share, like a few stories, a few photographs that you can use. And so thanks to that, we were able to go to all of these six provinces in addition to Kabul by traveling with NGOs. So basically, let's say our cover was we were doing, communications for NGOs. So that allowed us to travel safely inside the country. In terms of meeting women, so there were different things we did. I had a little bit of network. Kiana also had a network. So we were able to, first of all, call people we already knew, explain the project. And then also it was very much a snowballing, like, do you know a woman? Could you introduce us? Because it's very much based on trust. So if you're introduced by someone, she trusts us and she can kind of vouch for her. It helps a lot. We also did meet women via the NGO we traveled with. So for example, when we went to Torham, the border crossing with Pakistan, we met with a lot of women returnees from Pakistan. So that was thanks to the NGO we traveled with. We had access to a wonderful maternity ward for a few days and nights in Zabul in the south. That's also because an NGO was managing this maternity ward. So we had different ways of getting access like this.
Mhm. Were you followed? Were you stopped?
We had a couple of times where we felt very uncomfortable and turned around. One of them was in Bamiyan. We had another case in Kabul, actually, as well. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
one in Badakhshan as well, where we were.
And one in Badakhshan, that's true.
Yeah. How were you? Oh, 1 second. Glenn, how much time do we have?
Um, yeah, we're doing good on time, but why don't we open it up to audience questions now, if
Okay,
it's okay.
sure. I've been kind of following it. Let's take some of the questions one is, were you able to give the women any photographs?
So the photographs, some of the women were still in touch with them. Really depends where they come from. If they were an IDP and don't have any phones or don't have anything, or if they were just pushed back from Pakistan, still on the move, it's very hard to keep in touch with them. But those who lived in more urban areas or they're educated enough to have a phone to be able in touch, we're actually in touch with most of them. We have sent them, some of them, their photos. Some of them, when we were photographing them, they were heavily involved in how we photographed them. Again,
Right.
I mentioned this because you need to have a visual literacy in order to be able to, like, for us to get them to weigh in how you want to be photographed. And then Melissa she's actually just on her way out of, she was on her way out of Afghanistan when she got stranded in Dubai, she took some of our books back to Afghanistan and got it to the girls. So the idea is we're very much hoping we have these like fold out with the dream girls, and we have this like really hope that we get all of the dream girls to sign 2 copies for us to keep, and they will keep that copy as well. So
Oh, that's so nice. I love that. Another question was about the book, specifically about the black shape on the cover. You know, I think Catherine Kim said, to me, it looked like a shadow of a man wearing a hat, matching with the title. So she was wondering if there's any specific intention or meaning you wanted to deliver with this.
I'm gonna perform how it looks like. So if you open, the hole goes into a black and then goes onto the, no, don't zoom. And then this, so I don't know if you guys can see so this is the hole is actually the poster. There was a poster on the outside of a women's market telling women how they should be dressed. And it was ripped. It was already like an act of resistance. So in our head this is the black, this is like the darkness to women's life, right? So this hole opens to the black, to this, but then you go inside their lives.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I love that. It's mysterious, but yeah, I can see how it looks a bit like somebody with a hat. Another question was, did the Taliban from Hamilton Santos, did the Taliban treat you differently as foreign women than they do the local women who live there? And what were the challenges you had faced in that regard?
Absolutely. And what's interesting is before the Taliban take over, it was more dangerous to be a foreigner because you could be targeted by kidnappings or others. After the Taliban take over, it would actually be somewhat safer to be identified as a foreigner because then they take a lot of pride in keeping the country safe and keeping people safe. But it's still something we had to play around a little bit. So for example, if we went to a house in a certain neighborhood, I would sometimes, like just cover myself a bit more just to be more discreet because you don't want the neighbors of the woman you're meeting to notice you, and then that could create problems for her. So it would depend. Sometimes I would cover a bit more. But we were very aware that, let's say, if we got quote unquote caught, we probably would be, deported from the country. But thankfully, so far for foreigners and foreign journalists, they haven't done, for example, hostage policy like some other countries do. So we knew that we had some risk, but we were ready to bear this risk. But the risk would really have been for the women we were meeting. They, for any infraction, and we've seen that a lot, women who were teaching girls, women who were continuing to work, women activists, they get arrested, they get detained, they get beaten. There's a lot of sexual violence in prison. So for them, the risks were infinitely higher than for us, and we really owed them to be extremely careful. So of course we were treated differently, and yeah.
Yeah, I had a thought. So the women's, you were in their homes, and so did their husbands have to give you permission to come there and do this work?
So we work with different women. Like some of them really depend on how open-minded the families were. I think I'm just thinking through. Yes, there were definitely like with the Talib families. Some of the Muska, the photo of Muska, we had to get the permission of her brother. Not only that, her brother had to be present in the room while I was photographing to make sure it's like appropriate and everything. But we mostly work, obviously, if these women agreed to be photographed, they were open-minded enough that the family was okay. We did have some people, and we also had an example, Tahmina. We met her through her father. We had gone to a school to photograph a high school that used to be a girls' school, and then now was abandoned. We wanted to like photograph it. He started telling the story of his daughter and how he broke into tears and how sad he was that she can't go to school. And we're kind of like very careful. It's like, can we talk to her? It's like, yeah, let's go to my house. You can even photograph her. So we had all on the spectrum.
Yeah, I was curious, like if you had any chance to get the opinions of the men on this huge change in the women's lives that they were with. And it sounds like in some cases very sympathetic.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the maybe even if we're not there to like photograph, but with our female colleagues and other like friends that we're sitting and getting, we always had this discussion. One thing, and Melissa just coming back, and I'm going in next week into Afghanistan, is that if inside every man with the return of the Taliban, it seems like a Talib has woken up. And the way I try to describe this to people outside is, like white supremacism always existed in America. It just at some point went underneath. But with return of Taliban, with the return of Taliban, well, Trump, with the return of Trump in 2016,
Flash, Trump.
people allowed themselves to express what they think, and they impose it on other people and they act on it. And this is exactly the same thing that has happened in Afghanistan. That like Talibanism existed in many men. They just like kept it quiet for 20 years and now
Yeah, it's back. So I had a question here that I'm gonna ask a question before it, but and then I'll get to it. So I heard you say that one of the starkest changes you encountered since the return of the Taliban was the loss of hope from a lot of women, that they felt that an activist had said, we have forgotten joy. We don't know from where any can be found. And so the question, which follows nicely with that, is, was it emotionally difficult for you all to be there?
yeah, I think both Melissa and I, it's even throughout the years that there was an ongoing war in Afghanistan, we always, at the end of the tunnel, there was a bit of hope, right? For us, I will speak for myself. I think it was a little bit hard because there was a point in my life and my career where doing certain stories for certain publication that was big would actually cause a change on the ground, would change things up, will impact how things were. And we knew with this project, and more so the deeper we went into it, is we realized not only we can't change anything, but we also realized the change is not coming and things are just getting darker and darker. So I personally struggled a lot with that.
Mhm.
Maybe.
And it's the same with me. And to be honest, things just keep getting worse and worse now. So I'm stranded here because I was flying out of Afghanistan, and just things became so difficult and depressing. And once again, you do good work, and it doesn't really matter how good your work is, because it doesn't it seems like it doesn't really matter. And I think we now feel a level of hostility that was maybe a little bit more covered before.
Toward
Hostility
you.
towards women.
Oh,
Yeah.
towards women in
Yeah.
general. There, yeah. I think that what you had said, Kiana, earlier about the historical perspective, it's like, what are the ways that you kind of keep going and keep telling these stories, right? And that is a very good point about that, because I know so many photographers I know want to make an impact with their work. They're involved in various kinds of topics and issues that mean a lot to them personally. And that is the question. How do you get up every day and brush yourself off and go do it again? Like what might be next for you?
Yeah. What's next, work-wise? I mean, Elizabeth was heavily influenced like the way but I'm developing this bigger project about education under attack, and it was kind of an outcome of my work in Afghanistan, where I had photographed a lot of schools that were attacked, like suicide attacked throughout the years. One specifically left um, changed me in a way, the who I am. And then with Taliban coming into power, the girls' education was banned, the boys' education, the quality was dropped. So I started looking around the world how education is constantly and systematically interrupted and attacked by men in power, from literal attack by bombing. And I mean, I don't know if you guys saw what happened in Iran 2 days ago. A school, elementary school, was attacked, and 168 children were killed. So from those kind of attacks to also, people get surprised that in Canada books are being banned in school, or in France, girls who choose to wear hijab or cover their face cannot attend public school, or these are all different ways where education is interrupted, which impacts the future. So at this very, very moment, I'm very obsessed with this. And obviously with everything going on in Iran, part of my heart and part of my eyes is on that place, in that place.
Definitely. I don't know how close we are to the end, but there was something else you said, and I think Kiana, that you quoted somebody else who had said this to you, and which I think is kind of like really resonated with me, in terms of how we all keep going with our work, was drop by drop, we will make a river. Can you tell us about the origin of that? I just love that, and I think it's like so hopeful.
Yeah, it's a Farsi saying. You would say قطره قطره جمع گردد وانگهی دریا شود. And I think it's something that I mean, in my work, I've done this. I think it's like slowly you do these like little drops of work, and then it all comes together as one piece. But also, this applies to wider aspect of life, is that I think different things that we had done over the years, Melissa and I, completely independently. It was always around women's rights, women's projects, what happens to them, their stories, and it all came into this like one sea as No Woman's Land. And I don't know if Melissa, do you relate? Does that like قطره قطره جمع گردد? Do you relate to that?
I do, even though in these days it's really hard to see the river, let's say. Um,
You're the
I do,
source.
and I guess one of the point of the project was also if anyone could like care, and if anyone realized that they both have power at their own level to bring a little bit of change, whether it's in their own school, in their own community, in their own workplace, in their own society. It would be fantastic. But I also think, to be very honest with you, um, people are just, it's just really difficult times, and it can be difficult to ask people to care about women's rights in a faraway country when they really struggle at home with the economy, and then they're also very overwhelmed by what they see in Ukraine and in Gaza and Israel and now in the Gulf and Iran, and
Here.
it's difficult. And I think what's very difficult about Afghanistan and the Taliban is there's very little you can do. You cannot influence them really. Diplomats tried engagement, they tried pressure, they tried every tool's in the toolbox, and it's really hard. It's a regime that just doesn't care. They don't care about sanction and all of that. They don't care about pressure. So it's also, I think, very difficult when you don't also provide people with a solution. It's not like, oh, write to your MP and all of that, which in some cases you can do. You can ask them to stop sending weapons, for example, all of that. In the case of Afghanistan, what's difficult is right now, it's really difficult to try to improve things there. And that's why one of our focus with Kiana is just trying to bring women out at least.
Mhm. Yeah.
1% at a
I
time.
think we all have to see ourselves as the source of the river, and each of us are adding our drops to it in our own ways on very different subject matter. And I think what you've done is beautiful, and actually quite hopeful when you look at it. But I know that Kiana, you said there's this the shadow that underneath what you're talking about, Melissa. I think we don't have any more questions, Glenn. I mean, I can go on, but maybe we're at the end of our time.
Yeah, I mean, we allow 90 minutes for these programs, but often there are three presenters rather than two. So this one may go a little shorter than some, and that's why we don't publish an end time. We say it starts at 1:30, but we don't say when it ends. So yeah, I think we've come to a close here. I want to thank everybody, Sarah, Kiana, Melissa, and everybody who's been here today. It's been a great discussion, and I look forward to
Can I
more.
add one thing? Brenda asked a
Yes.
good question that I want to reference. Brenda asked, how can people bring women out? I think it really depends where you are, which country you live in, and you have to look into the laws in your country. For example, as a Canadian, I know Canada has this private sponsorship program where 5 people come together, they raise there's X amount of money they need to raise, and then usually like church and they take responsibility for people that you bring out. So you have to like take care. So basically, you're removing them from the social services that the government needs to give. This I know for Canadian, but you have to look into your country and understand the law and how you can help them.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it'd be almost impossible to do that in the United States right now, given the current climate and administration here.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Kiana. All right. Thank you, everybody. This will be posted to the SDN YouTube channel in a few days. So everybody stay safe, stay positive. And Sarah started out by saying it's so great to be in community because that's what we need to do during these times.
Mhm.
And Sarah, thank
Thank,
you so much for moderating this talk. And Glenn, thanks
Oh,
for giving us this platform.
Yeah, you're
my
welcome.
thank you,
honor.
Glenn. Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, my honor. Thank you. Take care of yourselves. And let's not forget joy as resistance.
Yes.
Yes, I love that too. I'm gonna put some little notes up for myself. That and drop by drop. Thank you. Thank you guys.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.